This submitted material is a passionate, raw, live-stream transcript dedicated to memorializing conservative figure Charlie Kirk, analyzing the ideological circumstances of his assassination and defending his political legacy against detractors. But, right out of the gate, streamlining the narrative focus exclusively onto Charlie Kirk's life, warnings, and legacy will significantly amplify the emotional and political weight of the broadcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, right now the listener is just getting severe whiplash.
Oh, totally.
The current material, it severely dilutes its really powerful eulogy for Kirk by taking these extensive, just jarring detours into personal grievances against Candace Owens, tangential audience shoutouts, and, there's a bizarre, extended reaction to a Cenk Uygur video about farm animals.
Right, which just comes out of nowhere.
Exactly. These subplots completely hijack the emotional momentum. They distract from the actual poor thesis, which is that Kirk was this prophetic voice targeted by leftist violence.
Well, and I think we have to look at the psychology of the creator in this moment, because the underlying grief and the urgency in the speaker's voice, it's really palpable.
Yeah, you can feel it.
When a commentator is dealing with a profoundly traumatizing loss like this, it is a very natural human reflex for that anger to just look for any available target.
Sure, you lash out.
Exactly. But rhetorically, that reflex just destroys the structure of the argument. The broadcast will be in the middle of this deeply spiritual reflection on Kirk being anointed to do God's work, and then suddenly the listener is just pulled into a 10-minute tirade about a random detractor in the live chat.
Right, but I have to ask, if the creator is doing a live stream, interacting with the chat is just part of the medium, right?
Right.
So are you suggesting they completely ignore the real-time element of their own format?
No, not ignore it. But I am suggesting they need to maintain control of the narrative steering wheel. In any broadcast, attention is a finite resource.
Yeah, that's true.
Every time the creator engages with a tangential controversy or a random chat commenter, they are basically ceding control of the broadcast to a stranger. To put this in perspective, building a tribute broadcast is kind of like curating a museum memorial exhibit.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right? Because if you place a chaotic, unrelated internet meme right next to a solemn portrait of a fallen leader, the viewer just loses all sense of reverence. The negative space around the artifacts matters just as much as the artifacts themselves.
That makes total sense. So the actionable advice here, the suggestion, is to anchor every single segment directly to Kirk's legacy, ruthlessly cutting any subplot, any personal vendetta, or viral video reaction that doesn't serve to illustrate his direct impact or the specific ideological threats he warned against.
Exactly.
If an element in the transcript doesn't point the listener back to Charlie Kirk, it just has to be deleted.
Yeah, and what that looks like in practice, for concrete examples, is redirecting all that energy spent unpacking Candace Owens. The creator dedicates significant airtime to her alleged financial motives and her family history with addiction.
Which is just a huge detour.
Huge. That doesn't serve Charlie Kirk's legacy, it serves an internet beef. So the creator should completely excise that breakdown and use that reclaimed airtime to detail the specific warnings Kirk gave about the radical left.
Okay, I understand cutting the Candace Owens family history. That makes sense. But I do have to push back a little bit on cutting the Cenk Uygur segment.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because the creator is clearly trying to demonstrate the moral decay and the absurdity of the opposition by reacting to that clip about, the legalization of bestiality. So if they cut the Save the Goats segment entirely, don't they lose that stark contrast?
They lose a cheap laugh, but they gain rhetorical invincibility.
Interesting.
Let's look at the mechanism of persuasion here. When a listener is tuning in to understand the ideological circumstances of a political assassination, reacting to a clip of a political commentator discussing farm animals completely derails the gravity of the room. It just feels desperate.
Yeah, I see what you mean. The tonal shift is too much.
Exactly. If highlighting the danger or the absurdity of the opposition is necessary to the narrative, a much stronger choice would be to use a clip of a detractor directly criticizing Kirk's specific policies. You keep the conflict, but you keep it firmly rooted in the actual subject matter.
Right. So you're forcing the audience to stay in the pocket of the actual thesis.
Precisely.
But, even if the creator cuts all those tangential subplots, this tribute is still going to fail if they don't address the actual mechanics of how they are speaking to the audience. Because elevating the rhetorical tone to match the solemnity of a fallen leader will prevent the broadcast's core message from being undermined by ad hominem attacks.
Oh, tone is the vehicle that carries your argument, And the dissonance in this transcript is just aggressively jarring. I mean, you have a speaker who is simultaneously mourning a profoundly traumatizing loss, describing crying in their spouse's arms, and then minutes later they're adopting the cadence of a shock jock.
It really is. The weakness here is that the tribute's gravity is repeatedly punctured by this abrasive name call. I mean, the creator uses terms like scamdus, chunky yogurt, rabbit banshee, and cuckoo candy.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Along with highly chaotic internet slang. And this deeply informal, retaliatory tone, it inadvertently weakens the creator's central argument that the opposing side is the one driven by irrationality and violence.
Let's break down why that actually happens from a listener's perspective. When you use a term like scamdus or rabbit banshee, you instantly trigger the listener's psychological defense mechanisms.
Right.
You are signaling to their brain that you are no longer operating as an authoritative, grieving narrator. You are operating as an internet troll.
Wow. Yeah.
It causes cognitive dissonance because the listener doesn't know whether they're supposed to mourn a martyr or laugh at a meme. You completely surrender the emotional high ground.
But wait, isn't the current political meta basically entirely built on this kind of abrasive, mock-heavy rhetoric? I mean, is there a risk that by dropping the insults, the creator ends up sounding like a dry, disconnected academic paper instead of delivering a passionate defense?
That's a valid concern.
Because I wonder if the creator just feels they are fighting fire with fire, you know? Does this material inadvertently mirror the very culture Charlie Kirk was trying to elevate people out of?
Well, that's exactly the issue. There's a massive difference between righteous indignation and a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Righteous anger is incredibly compelling, but it has to remain righteous. If the thesis of this broadcast is that Charlie Kirk represented principled, rational discourse in the face of unhinged hostility, then deploying unhinged hostility to defend him actually proves the detractor's point.
Right. It totally undercuts the premise.
It inadvertently mirrors the culture he fought against. Like you said, it fractures the authority of the speaker.
That is such a crucial rhetorical trap to point out. So the suggestion here is to adopt a more measured, dignified tone that channels that righteous indignation through articulate, principle-based argumentation rather than just, schoolyard insult.
Exactly. You force the listener to actually engage with your premise.
So how do we execute this on the page?
It's entirely about shifting the target of the attack. For example, when addressing Tyler Robinson, the assassin, or the TikToker who labeled Kirk a fascist, the creator should remove all the visceral insults and psychological assumptions. Attacking a TikToker based on her biracial background or assumed parental guilt doesn't dismantle her argument. It just makes the speaker look petty.
Right, so instead of that, they should dissect the ideological blind spots these individuals represent. Like frame the TikToker's comments as an example of the Marxist conditioning that Amelia Carter discussed in the interview rather than just dismissing her.
Yes. By replacing the insults with historical and ideological deconstruction, the creator actually honors Kirk's legacy of debating the ideas themselves rather than just attacking the person.
Which makes the defense so much stronger.
Right. And another practical application of this shift applies to how the creator handles the detractors in the live chat. Rather than responding with sarcasm and sound effects, like literally playing a goat noise over their comments, the creator could elevate the discourse by deconstructing the history of the ideology those commenters are defending.
Yeah, that changes the whole vibe.
When you elevate the rhetoric, you transition the piece from a transient reaction video into a true, lasting ideological thesis.
Which brings up a secondary problem, actually. If you pull back on the insults and the internet slang, you kind of leave a rhetorical vacuum. You can't just remove the attacks. You have to fill that void with concrete proof.
Absolutely.
So grounding the broad claims about Kirk's legacy in specific, substantive examples of his work will transition the piece from a basic eulogy into a robust, undeniable ideological defense.
Show, don't tell is not just a polite suggestion for creative writing. It is literally a cognitive requirement for belief revision.
Right.
If you want a skeptic to change their mind, or even just want a supporter to feel validated, you cannot simply ask them to take your word for it.
And the weakness in this current draft is that while the material makes incredibly bold claims, like asserting that Kirk was a visionary who did more for Black Americans than his detractors, and that he consistently warned of leftist violence, it relies almost entirely on broad, sweeping assertions.
Yeah, it's very surface level in that regard.
It constantly tells the audience that Kirk was great, but it rarely shows his actual arguments. It doesn't quote his specific debates or detail the mechanics of his initiative.
And if you claim someone was a masterful debater who changed the cultural landscape, the audience needs to actually hear the debate. If you say someone created unparalleled opportunities for marginalized communities, we need to see the blueprints and the execution of those opportunities. Because without empirical evidence, a eulogy is really just a list of opinions.
So the suggestion to fix this is to anchor this emotional praise with concrete case studies of his campus tours, policy debates, or specific organizational initiatives to empirically prove his impact and basically validate his warnings about political escalation.
Yes, exactly. We need the data, the quotes, the moments that defined his career, not just the emotional aftermath of his passing.
So for a concrete example, let's look closely at the section discussing the Blexit. The creator mentions in passing that Kirk handed Blexit over to Black leadership.
Right, but they only mention it as a quick counterattack against Candace Owens.
Right, but isn't pointing out that historical event enough to establish his credentials on the subject?
No, because mentioning a historical event is not the same as leveraging it as a rhetorical weapon. Dropping it in passing robs the moment of its power. Instead of just a quick mention, the creator should detail a specific moment from a Blexit event where he bridged a cultural divide.
Oh, like painting the scene.
Paint the scene for the listener. What was the tension in the room? What were the exact words he used to hand over that leadership? Bringing a specific case study to life empirically proves the claim that he was an uplifting force, rather than just using his actions as a club to hit a rival with.
That fundamentally changes the weight of the segment. You move from a defensive posture to an offensive evidentiary posture.
Exactly.
So let's apply that same logic to the core theme of the broadcast, the idea that Kirk warned us about the leftist sword.
Right now, the transcript just repeats the phrase that he warned us. It relies on the listener's memory. Instead of summarizing his warnings, quote exactly what Kirk said about the Marxist mutation prior to his death.
Oh, that would be powerful.
Right? The creator should pull a specific timestamp from one of his campus Q&A sessions where he accurately predicted the escalation of political violence. Letting Kirk's own prophetic words echo through the transcript will send chills down the listener's spine. It proves a thesis without the creator having to say a single aggressive word.
That is incredibly effective. And I want to look at the interview with Amelia Carter because the way the creator uses her insights is easily the strongest part of the source material.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Right. Carter provides this amazing insider breakdown of critical theory. She explains the destabilization of identity and the Marxist need to smear opponents as fascists in order to justify violence against them. It explains the why behind the tragedy beautifully.
It is a fantastic analytical framework, but right now it just sits isolated in the transcript. The ultimate way to ground this broadcast is to take Amelia Carter's framework and apply it directly as a lens to analyze one of Kirk's specific speeches.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The material effectively uses the interview to explain why he was targeted, the Marxist conditioning. So now show the audience a specific instance of Kirk standing on a stage, recognizing that exact conditioning in a protester and attempting to dismantle it in real time.
That synthesis would make the ideological critique absolutely bulletproof. You take the theoretical framework provided by the guest expert and you map it directly onto the historical actions of the protagonist. It proves that Kirk wasn't just a passive victim of this ideology, but a masterful, active opponent of it.
Precisely. By weaving those elements together, you transform a passive memorial into an active continuation of his work. This broadcast has the potential to be a profoundly moving piece of political media, provided the creator is willing to just refine the structure.
Totally agree.
So, to quickly recap the core feedback from today's critique, first, we advise streamlining the narrative focus strictly and exclusively onto Charlie Kirk. Second, elevate the rhetorical tone to honor his memory by moving away from ad hominem attack. And finally, ground the broad claims about his legacy in specific, substantive examples of his work and philosophy.
And the actionable summary for the listener is to implement these suggestions by systematically going through the transcript and just cutting the Candace Owens subplots and the Sank Uyghur reactions entirely. Then replace the slang and name-calling with articulate ideological deconstruction. And finally, add direct quotes, timestamps, and case studies from Kirk's actual career to support the emotional claims being made.
We invite the creator to revise this transcript based on these editorial lenses and submit their work back in for another critique. Remember, if you want a monument to withstand the test of time, you have to be willing to chip away everything that isn't solid marble until only the truth remains standing.